The power of knowledge is rendered useless if said knowledge is hoarded, and Arrival shows us that if you follow fear with violence while preventing communication, said fear, violence, and ignorance will only spread. But if you communicate with pure intention and trust, that power knowledge provides will only swell. Amy Adams' Louise Banks is the sole female character in the film, except for her daughter Hannah, who we only see in flashbacks, or rather flash forwards. Much like Margaret Mead studying primitive cultures in the early 1900s, Banks can't help but symbolize the hyper-feminine by virtue of being the only woman in the picture. Louise is surrounded by impatient men who are all horrified what other impatient men will do in the presence of something that poses no threat other than being completely alien. The film expertly builds a universe outside the sets and locations through news clips, which perfectly demonstrates that the further you get from the truth, the closer you get to panic and chaos. Arrival stands out in a subgenre you might call time, space, and the human experience, with contemporaries like Tree of Life and Interstellar breathing down its neck. I firmly believe for a film to truly reach its potential, it must itself be an example of the theme it's navigating. Arrival achieves this by suggesting perhaps the most significant creation of mankind is the concept of time, which Arrival perfectly manipulates. Jimmy the Toucan joins me now to review the film. So let's see who gave Arrival a higher score.
Hey, Jimmy. Thanks for joining.
Hey, Al, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Spoiler, I really liked Arrival.
I did too. You were so poignant in your introduction, pointing out that the main character was the only woman. I think it's something that we should continue talking about.
I want to get back to that when we get into the characters and performances. So I'll ask you just right out of the gate, in terms of plot, what did you think about Arrival?
I think that we don't know ever really what's happening. We know that there is a mystery that has to be solved, and it feels a lot of times because we are facing all of this new information from the perspective of this main character. It's easy as it's happening to speculate what they are, and it's really fascinating how information is revealed over the course of the storytelling. For an alien movie, there are certainly some predictable plot points that occur, but it is very seamless, and I think it's a lot of fun.
And I've got to ask you, I mean, obviously the most distinct thing about the plot is you just assume that things are playing out in a linear fashion, but by the end of the picture you realize that's the furthest thing from the truth.
I'm a really big fan of this director, and I had seen his previous works in the theater, and I really wanted to see it on the big screen when it happened. My friends were really into it and going back for a second time or a third time, which I think is always, a good sign that people like it. I think there's this wonderful connection I feel in the beginning. I was 21 years old when 9/11 happened. There was this moment where everybody turned the TV on and nobody knew what was happening, but what was unfolding was really scary and looked like a movie. And there's this trope, and you mentioned it earlier, there's this trope of using the news for exposition. Even as audience members watching, I feel that same apprehension of what is this? I think that these creatures being so non-humanoid and squid-like are terrifying, and we don't know, as she's attempting to communicate, and as these as you point out, all as these other men in power are quick to touch the finger to the trigger, she uses this universal thing, which is our language, our form of communication, which offers then this potential for just about global unity, alien race, human race, kind of a connection that can be made. And it turns out that language is the key to the entire mystery.
In how appropriately that all us humans can freely communicate, and it's visually demonstrated really well when everybody is sort of on the board and they start unplugging, and they remove themselves from the conversation strictly by choice or by fear or for political motive. And they're literally two different species that are learning to communicate with each other when, like I said, simultaneously people who can easily communicate just choose not to for kind of bullshit reasons. I mean, to keep things moving, I will then ask you, obviously 1 out of 10, if you were going to designate the plot a rating, what would you give
I
it?
gave it a 9 because where it lost credibility and perfection with me is that it does, if you boil it down, it is very much a fear of the other story. And it does have a very good twist to it that unifies the whole thing, which I think makes it very strong.
No, hey, I mean, you can only do a little bit better than that. I mean, moving on, and it's an easy transition because you were already talking about it. When we focus on the characters and the performances in this movie, I really felt like the characters in this movie are more caricatures in that they all represent something much larger than themselves. They're not really, Amy Adams very clearly to me represented the hyper feminine, represented sort of a female voice, a very nurturing sort of role, especially when it came to communicating and sort of parenting, if you will, this connection. Um, and again, I feel like it was very well done. I hope it doesn't come across like a negative when I'm saying that they're caricatures, but these individuals, like I said, all seem to represent something much larger than themselves. I mean, do you agree? And how did the characters and performance leave you feeling?
I think they're all very strong. And I think that when you present stars like Forrest Whitaker or Jeremy Renner, opportunities to like be masculine, be tough, yet be sensitive to the needs of the hero. I think all of the actors are really, really well cast. I think it was the first time I ever saw Amy Adams, and I really like, man, she's a star. Like she
Yeah.
is really a star. She really.
Well, everybody has so much going on underneath the surface. Everybody's performances are really sort of reserved, and obviously it's just sort of the nature of the story, how it reveals itself. It sort of demands that. But even in the case of Whitaker, it's hard for me to think of another performance that I've ever seen where somebody was clearly scared shitless, but was also like forced to be in control and forced to be in command. And he somehow does that perfectly where you you trust him only because he clearly knows that he's just being told to do something for the sake of being told to do something, and he just has to enforce it. I don't know. There was something weirdly charming about that in his role.
I also want to give credit to Michael Stuhlbarg, who played the CIA, FBI, government agent guy. He is quite good at being a villain, and he representing that kind of extreme government paranoid official. I really enjoyed. I like him a lot in that.
You're so close to the action in the movie, you never really go outside the wall. Like you don't really ever venture too far from Amy Adams' character. It's hard for me to think off the top of my head of any scene that she's not even in. It's such a small, intimate kind of group. It's such a rich kind of chemistry and tapestry. Again, while all characters sort of just completely baffled by what's going on, and very realistically, like I said, everything's just sort of understated. What would you grade that as a category, 1 out of 10?
I gave it a 9.
I think Amy would be happy to hear that. Has Amy Adams ever done a bird movie? I feel like you would know. I don't know
Oh,
if
she's done all kinds of bird movies.
I was wondering if you were going to mention her performance. She was very young, but if I'm not mistaken, she was in the Birdcage.
She really.
If I'm not mistaken. I think the couple goes to adopt like a baby, and I think Amy Adams is the baby.
Maybe we should just talk about Julie and Julia for the rest of the.
Actually, maybe as just a staple of the show, if build in like a break in case of emergency, we can just break into a Julia and Julia discussion if possible. The next section here is visual storytelling. This movie had a few good shots in it. Agree or disagree?
When you point the camera at something, it in so many ways conveys an incredible amount of underlying meanings. I want to call attention to this subtle celebration of abstract art. When the creatures, Abbott and Costello, which I thought was very funny and appropriate, when they use this fluid to create these circular patterns that represent their language,
Mm-hmm.
it's such an interesting choice.
And what a task to have. I mean, there's movies. You mentioned there's movies about painters, and it's like, how do you film someone painting for more than a few seconds before you're just watching someone painting? There's movies about making music, very similar. How do you bridge that? How do you really connect that experience? Adapt it is what I'm trying to say. I thought maybe the most successful achievement in this movie, especially on a visual basis, just was really masterfully and successfully checking that box of going, how do we tell a story about two languages figuring each other out visually? The way you've phrased it and kind of framed it as being abstract and this very visual, painterly approach to it, I find that really fascinating.
I have a couple shots that I want to call attention to. One in particular is in the beginning when the girl in the classroom asks for her to turn the TV on. She turns and she faces the TV, and we are hearing what's happening. And then we are seeing this great reaction shot of Amy Adams, and it's like, it's this, we don't get to see what she's looking at. We're watching her respond to it.
Right.
That's a really great moment. When they figure out, they take the scissor lift all the way up to the inside of the chamber of the pod, and there's this great moment where gravity sort of flips around.
Yeah.
And that's a really wonderful moment. I have a physiological fear of heights, but not a psychological fear of heights. If I'm on top of a ladder, I can climb up a ladder all day and I'm not afraid. I'm not, but what happens is my body becomes afraid. So my feet go numb. My body is afraid, but my mind is not. There is a great moment where we're looking down and we can see the soldiers all the way down there at the bottom. Obviously, there are these great sweeping, beautiful scenic wide shots of these vistas. Yet, puncturing that vista is this sort of alien pod.
Yeah, just this thing you can't miss. This thing that is absolutely nothing. Like like if you were to describe it, it is almost the absence of form. It is just this thing, this big shadow. What I love is even, the opening, you mentioned that they take the lift up into, it felt like a bit of a nod, a little bit of a 2001 Kubrickian sort of hole that they go up into, if you will. Very, very much, help me out here, Jimmy. Why the hell can't I think? I keep wanting to say obelisk, and it's not the obelisk. What in 2001? What am I?
Isn't it the obelisk? Is it not the obelisk?
It's not an obelisk. No, it's something else, and I can't think of what it's called. And we're both blinking, but regardless, people are probably screaming into their computers right now saying what it is. Good. Let us know in the comments what the hell that thing is called. I did feel like that was kind of a cool nod. I couldn't help but think that the hole in the spaceship that they entered into could have been any shape, and it felt like a pretty simple and obvious nod.
I really like the part where she runs away from the army guys, and the pod sends down this little capsule that she just willingly gets in, and it injects her into the room where the creatures are in.
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful flowing, as if she's underwater and she's trying to breathe, and really heavenly. It's a really nice moment.
No, they really do such a great job of just everything feels alien. There's nothing about the experience that she has with those creatures.
Yeah.
The monolith was the word I was looking.
That's it. Monolith.
Monolith. Points to anybody who commented monolith. Anybody who's ever taken a film class knows what the Kuleshov effect is. I don't know that I've ever, again, in a film, seen such an effective use of the Kuleshov effect. And I would say the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie, again, are a perfect demonstration. Jimmy, would you mind sort of explaining to the viewer who might not be familiar with the Kuleshov effect what that means, what that refers to?
It's a visual language idea where when you show somebody a particular image of something and it is the subject, and then you show them something else, uh, be it an object,
Mm-hmm.
there becomes um, a choice is made from the viewer about how they emotionally feel about that subject.
You mentioned it earlier. One of the best examples I've ever seen is when Amy Adams arrives to her class to teach. We think, because of the sequences that we just saw, that we know exactly where her headspace is, and we're incorrect.
At the end, the pods, the ships,
Mm-hmm.
they just vaporize.
Yeah.
They- amongst those beautiful vistas I mentioned, uh, the end is symbolized by their vanishing, and I thought that was wonderful. I gave the visual storytelling, Al, I gave it a 10.
Spoiler, that might be the correct answer. But before we get to that, use of sound. And Jimmy, I happen to know you're a bit of a sound bird yourself. I certainly appreciated the sound design and the use of sound, the score. What did you think?
Well, I like the subtle electronic score. Um, there are very few cues, but when they come in, they're very, very effective and poignant. When Forrest Whitaker shows up to Amy Adams' office, he plays her recording, and
Mhm.
he wants her to translate this alien language, which is, a low grumble growl
Right.
with a couple like clicks in it or something, and it is very haunting. And she says, is this from the, and he's like, yep. I think it's an uh expert level of sound design. Even, these like slow like whooshes when the fluid is creating the circle language
Yeah.
on the glass was really fascinating. There are other moments that sound is used to tell the story completely. For example, when the detonator is counting down,
Mhm.
we hear the soldiers down on the ground. All we hear is like very faint, like, gunshots down there, like machine gun fire. I strongly feel that this is as high of a performance on the technical sound department. I did give it a 10. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. And the only other thing I want to add to that is there's a scene very early on. I actually think it's when Amy Adams is walking from her car into her class. It might be right after class, but I think it's when she's on her way in where she's walking and she quickly whips her head over right after the sound of two jets fly over.
Oh, yeah.
You do, and it isn't until the next shot that it's a longer shot and she sort of walks in and you know promotes the camera to move in a certain way, and then we see some, what I would assume are fighter jets that were added in post. But even the amount of time that it takes for whatever small team added those shots, added those planes, they got just as much mileage out of that using exclusively the sound design in the shot before. So as a mascot for a production company, I have to point out that is about as good a producing as you can get in a movie. Because I didn't even think they needed in the next shot to see the fighter jets flying over. But again, any young filmmakers or older filmmakers out there who are balling on a budget, I think that's a really really great lesson to take away that, sometimes when you're setting atmosphere, you don't have to see things. You can have a character just look away and hear something, and the audience will connect those dots. The last category, Jimmy, we're going to wrap it up here. Theme. This movie comes heavy with the themes. Let's be real. This is not a light movie. So what'd you give it, Jimbo?
Well, I think that there's a lot going on here, and it comes first from Ted Chiang's book, The Story of Your Life. And he asks, what if the experience of knowing the future changed a person? What if it evoked a sense of urgency, a sense of obligation to act precisely as she knows she would? And what's fascinating is that there is this argument here in embedded within this discussion about language. There's this argument between free will and determinism. It is visualized in these two really abstract understandings we have of time and memory, and using language as a way, and visual language as a way to convey these things. When Amy Adams' character meets Jeremy Renner's, he reads to her from her own book, saying, language is the foundation of civilization, which, like, in a very powerful way, positions her to us understanding where she comes from.
But it also, in that moment, if I can, it also is a flagpole that is stuck in the dirt regarding the arc of the theme, not just the arc of Amy Adams. Because when we begin that, we understand this. This is a character that is here to levy communication. This is a story about communication. But when we get to the end, it is a story about time, and Amy Adams' power and dominion over her universe is completely altered because of her ability to rethink her concept of time. I love that I love that you bring up that quote from Jeremy Renner, or Jeremy Renner quoting Amy Adams' character. It's just such a perfect, beautiful beginning.
I agree.
Because he's challenging what the movie is effectively proving her to be correct in, that perhaps the ability to communicate is the only vessel, so to speak, for the ability to articulate what they're learning.
Well, let me put it like this. I felt kind of cheated when the key to unlock the connection when Amy Adams calls the Chinese president. She indicates that she's meeting him later after she has published this book about decoding the language and stuff, and and it was her key was his wife's final words, his wife's last words. I felt kind of cheated that we were not given what that is. In Ted Chiang's book, the line is, in war there are no winners, only widows. And I think that would have been a really important moment for this film to celebrate language, and in the way that it does. Withholding that, I felt I did feel quite cheated from that. I want to circle back to this idea of first contact is this thing that we've discussed in science fiction for decades, right? Maybe a century now. This idea of a potential, like, human race, global unity, this thing which would be quite a utopia. I think we could have centered on that a little bit more. I think that would have been really, really helpful. There's this argument between free will and determinism. It wasn't really solved for me, so it lost some points down to an 8.
I don't know that I align with your identification of what the theme is. If she said the quote that you feel like is missing to him, in that moment, the audience would be thinking about that quote and absorbing it, which I think in a literary capacity is the experience you're after. But in the cinema, I feel like that moment just needed to be about them communicating. It needed to be about there being sort of an intimate exchange of something. And I think just with the time restraints, with the visual restraints of film, I think you just have to keep it moving. I think you have to do it in a way that's a little bit more of a metaphor. So their relationship, I don't know, I felt like it really was appropriate for the theme. Jimmy, it's there's no wrong answers here, but we've come to the end here. You have a score. Just to recap for everybody, and I will soon reveal my score because I know everybody's anticipating it. The plot you gave a 9, the characters and performances you gave a 9, the visual storytelling you gave a 9, the use of sound you gave, I'm sorry, the visual storytelling you gave a 10, the use of sound you gave a 10, and the theme you gave an 8. That gives you a total of a 92. That's an A, Jimmy. Are you okay with that? Do you want to give?
Oh yeah, I absolutely give this movie an A.
Now, Jimmy, drum roll, if you will. I gave the plot a 10. I thought it was as good a plot as you can get. I felt like it never really stopped evolving. The characters and performances, I gave a 9.5. In this episode, I'll be talking later with another good friend of ours about Sicario. And that film houses a performance that alone, I think, takes the movie to a 10. And that was the only thing. As great as the performances were in Arrival, I do think the themes and in the plot stand out more. So I just had to dock it a little bit because I thought it was just missing that one sort of iconic performance that people would be talking about and remember the movie for. So I gave it a 9.5. The visual storytelling, I gave a 10. The use of sound, I gave a 10. And the theme, I gave a 10. I genuinely think this movie does sort of perfectly execute what it's setting out to do, which again calls into question our as a species relationship with time. And I think the movie is a perfect example of how just slightly manipulating time can completely change someone's perspective on things. So for me, it was a 10 out of 10. That gives it a 99. So for me, it was an A plus.
All right.
Will you come back again, Jimmy?
Oh, I'll be here.
All right. Until next time. Thanks, buddy.